All right, in recent years, Nigeria has emerged as a significant player in the global cryptocurrency landscape, showcasing remarkable resilience and adaptability despite regulatory challenges. As the country retains its position as the second highest nation on the 2024 Global Crypto Adoption Index, it highlights a growing trend of crypto adoption among Nigerians, driven by factors such as population size, purchasing power, and innovative peer-to-peer transaction methods. This conversation will delve into the complexities surrounding Nigeria's crypto ecosystem, exploring the implications of recent regulatory actions, the evolving stance of government authorities, and the potential for future growth in the sector. Joining me for more on this, I have Professor Iwa Salami, Director, Centre of Fintech, University of East London. Thank you, Professor, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's always a pleasure to have you. How do you assess the current regulatory environment for cryptocurrencies in Nigeria, especially in light of the recent clampdowns and evolving stance of authorities like the CBN and SEC?
So obviously the history around cryptocurrency regulation in Nigeria, or crypto assets regulation, has been huge, dating back from when the authorities, and I'll say this, the central bank, began to issue out, regulation or documentation, sort of advising investors to pay particular attention on the impact that this could have on their investments. It's been interesting. I think if we go back to the very recent past, from I think the year 2022 was when the central bank issued this outright ban. February 2022, what tantamounted to a ban that financial institutions, banks, shouldn't be transacting, if you like, or creating or opening accounts for crypto asset firms, which obviously was a big thing. But then there was a reversal of that stance in December 2023, which in effect was I'd say a good thing for the market, and also kind of showing that the regulatory authorities are aligning their position on crypto assets regulation. Why? Because the Securities and Exchange Commission had earlier in 2022 issued this new framework for regulation. So that's the Securities and Exchange Commission for Nigeria, pretty much sort of setting out guidelines as to the approaches to regulating virtual asset service providers, and basically the transactions that actually happen on them, covering also things to do with sort of the trading of those assets on virtual asset service provider platforms, as well as things like sort of identification. And then to very recently, in August, having a situation where the Securities and Exchange Commission basically have taken the stance that they would be willing to actually provide licenses for virtual asset service providers, such as crypto assets firms, which is a very brilliant thing, because what this does is to show the market that yes, indeed, there's a recognition that there's a potential that crypto assets actually have in I'd say in the financial space, and the potential that it has in both facilitating financial inclusion both for retail investors, i.e. people like you and I, and also for small businesses. So the outlook is looking positive, although we do still need a very clear position on the consistency of regulation from the authorities, and that would be the central bank and the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering about 3 questions in one. That's a good one. Well, given that Nigeria has retained its position as the second highest, country in the Crypto Global Adoption Index, what specific market dynamics do you believe are driving this particular growth, despite the regulatory challenges that you just talked about, so much so that we're not even really sure of what we're supposed to do and all of that?
So I think the key issues or the key reasons why crypto assets are, continuing to grow in a country like Nigeria is the fact that there's still this potential that it's helping to help, for example, it's helping small and medium-sized enterprises access the type of, if you like, foreign currency that they need to transact. So if we look at sort of stable coins, for example, a lot of small businesses could actually access USDC or USDT to use to engage in their, cross-border transactions or businesses. And it's very difficult for them to actually access, it's far more difficult for them to actually access the dollars in fiat form than to actually access USDC, which is basically, the crypto asset version, if you like, of USDC, of the US dollar. And it's very easy for them to then exchange this as a form of payment method for their transaction, for their transactions with businesses that they transact with globally. So this is a very good alternative, I'd say, to payments and also to facilitate payments, particularly for small businesses. Now, for individuals like yourself, so you and I, the opportunity to also have other options in transacting. So have other options in receiving remittance, if you like, options in sort of, again, effecting payments for people that have access to crypto assets and through, obviously, exchanges. And again, this makes payments easier. And I think what a lot of jurisdictions are doing in this era, if you like, of digitalization is actually to create opportunities or options and alternatives for their citizens. So the approach that the Nigerian regulators are adopting is a very positive one for retail investors, positive one for small and medium-sized enterprises, positive one for even just much more confidence in the market, because of course when we know that there is, well, the regulators are beginning to create the opportunities to adequately regulate the space, then investors who previously may have seen the industry as one that's very risky and volatile then gain a bit of confidence in wanting to sort of transact in the space. And financial inclusion, is a big thing, whether for small and medium-sized enterprises or retail investors.
Well, irrespective of the challenges in the area of, let's say, legislation and all of that, that's talking about regulations now. What do you think about Nigerians, basically, and we've also been able to establish that they are basically hedging against currency risk and all of this. Shouldn't this be a wake-up call to the Monetary Policy Authority to fix the volatility in the currency rather than blame exchanges for manipulation? Or do you think these exchanges truly pose risks to the naira in the manner in which the regulators and government put it?
So, I mean, the situation in Nigeria is a very unique one. Across the world, in all the criticisms, I'd say, against crypto assets, issues, things like volatility, fraud, market abuse, and the like, there really hasn't been that criticism that they affect, affect the value of the domestic currency. In the case of Nigeria, the argument has been that the peer-to-peer, providing the peer-to-peer facility that some crypto asset exchanges offer makes it possible for participants to actually, if you like, hedge against currency exchanges in other types or in other forms of currency, and use that as a platform to actually, if you like, purchase foreign exchange and the like. Hence the clampdown that happened, I think, in April from the authorities. But I think these issues raise much more broader issues around monetary sovereignty. Although, as I say, in the case of Nigeria, there hasn't really been in comparison to the rest of the world, there hasn't really been that criticism that crypto assets affect the value of the currency, but there has been the fear that the increased use of crypto assets, such as Bitcoin, Ether, and the like, can have an impact on monetary sovereignty. And that has been the fear of jurisdictions across the world. And as a result of that, those jurisdictions are exploring other ways of handling and dealing with the situation, such as, for example, through central bank digital currencies, which it is believed if believed as countries are exploring them, or monetary authorities, central banks are exploring them, really can be the anchor for new forms of currency, so currencies such as the crypto assets that we're talking about, and therefore the exploration, if you like, of central bank digital currencies is an opportunity actually for central banks to actually come into the space, have a closer perspective of what is going on, and also create options for easier forms of payments for citizens. So there are positions that regulatory authorities can take to effectively actually regulate the space. And, looking at the exploration, I would say, as most countries are looking at central bank digital currencies, I think would be a very useful approach actually for Nigerian authorities to do, particularly as we're beginning to see signs that the regulatory framework, particularly coming from Securities and Exchange Commission, is one that's gearing towards being favorable towards the industry. So I think there are a few policy actions that can be taken, to really see that this industry thrives and that really does what it does. It could do best, which is facilitating financial inclusion for people that are excluded, and even also opportunities for small and medium-sized firms. So yeah.
Well, just before I let you go, what can you say to us about, what Nigeria can do to actually combat that fear around currency manipulation? What can be done to combat it? I mean, beyond just clamping down, what can Nigeria actually do in the area of maybe structure or even policy?
So, I mean, the regulators have a lot of power. And I think for the Securities and Exchange Commission, what would really be required is it's brilliant that there's this framework that can be built on. So there's a framework of the new regulatory provisions that I mentioned, with the guidelines as to virtual asset service providers and the various aspects of regulation, such as sort of crypto trading, crypto exchanges, licensing, and things like that. But these are still very skeletal, meaning that there's still a need to actually flesh out regulation. So regulation that impacts on some of the things that you're talking about, the impact of peer-to-peer trading on the currency, and the impact also of cryptocurrency exchanges on things like market abuse, linked with the problems that we just mentioned about sort of the impact on the currency. So market abuse, insider dealing, front running, which is very rife in the industry. And regulation can come on board in a way as to embrace regulatory technology. So there are quite a few regulatory technology provisions out there that some countries have already begun to explore. So there are cryptocurrency or blockchain analytics firms that can be brought on board to actually assist the country in helping to not just only put in place frame regulation, but also to actually see to the enforcement of those types of regulation. So we've got analysis and quite a few regulatory technology.
Thank you so much. I know there's a whole lot to say, but we have to just end it here. Thank you so much, Professor Iwa Salami, Director, Centre of Fintech, University of East London. Thank you for your time and your thoughts on the show today. We hope to have this conversation some other time.
Thank you for having me.